The emergency sirens had been screaming for 3 hours when the first Draconari refugee ship limped into the docking bay of Outpost Meridian. And Daniel Cooper watched from his workshop window as the massive vessel, scarred with burns and weapon marks, settled onto the landing pad with a groan of dying engines that told him these people had barely survived their journey across the stars. He had seen refugees before. Humans fleeing border conflicts and alien families escaping plague worlds. But he had never seen the Draconari run from anything because they were the ancient ones. The dragon people who had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. Proud and powerful and afraid of nothing. Yet here they were, pouring out of damaged ships with their scales dull from stress and their wings folded tight against their backs, carrying children and the wounded and little else. And Daniel felt his heart break at the sight of them, because fear looked the same on every face, regardless of species commander. Maria Holloway's voice came through the station intercom, calling all medical personnel to the docking bay and requesting volunteers to help with food and shelter. And Daniel was about to leave his workshop when his door slid open and Maria herself walked in with a look on her face that told him this was not a simple request. Behind her stood an ancient Draconari with scales the color of dark iron and eyes that held centuries of memory. And beside the elder was a child, small and silver blue, clutching something against his chest like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Daniel, this is Elder Sithrak of the Draconari Council, Maria said in her calm commander voice that she used when things were very bad. And this young one is Kathrai, and they need your help. Elder Sithrak looked at Daniel with an expression that mixed desperation with doubt, clearly uncertain that a human could offer anything of value. But the child just stared at the floor with eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. The Vexery Collective attacked our homeworld without warning, the elder said in a voice like grinding stones. And we lost many, including this child's brother Vernash, who died protecting him during the escape. Daniel nodded slowly, wondering why they had come to him specifically since he was just an engineer who fixed broken machines and faulty systems. Not a counselor or a healer or anyone equipped to help with grief. Show him, Maria said gently to the child. And Kathrai looked up for the first time, his golden eyes wet with tears that had not yet fallen. The young dragon slowly opened his small clawed hands, and Daniel saw what he held, a crystal about the size of a human fist, glowing faintly with swirling colors inside. But the glow flickered and faded because a deep crack ran through the center of the crystal, like a wound that would not heal. This is my brother, Kathrai said in a small voice that trembled with every word. He put himself inside before he died so he could stay with me forever. But the crystal broke when our ship was hit, and now he is fading away and I cannot hear him anymore. Daniel felt something twist in his chest because he understood this kind of pain. The desperate need to hold on to someone who was gone. The terror of losing the last piece of them you had left. Memory crystals are sacred to our people, Elder Sithrak explained with a heavy sigh. When a Draconari knows death is coming, they can transfer their consciousness, their memories, their very essence into a crystal so that their loved ones can still speak with them and feel their presence. But if the crystal breaks beyond repair, the soul inside is lost forever. And you want me to fix it, Daniel said. Not as a question, but as an understanding of why they had come to the man who could repair anything on the station. I want nothing from humans, the elder replied with a flash of old pride in his eyes. But the child heard stories about you, about the human who can fix anything. And he begged me to bring him here, even though I told him our technology is beyond human understanding. Daniel looked at the child, at the cracked crystal, at the fading light inside that held everything Kathrai had left of his brother. And he thought about his own son who had died 7 years ago from a sickness no doctor could cure. leaving Daniel with nothing but photographs and the echo of a laugh he was starting to forget. "I cannot promise anything," Daniel said as he knelt down to be at eye level with the young dragon. "Your technology is very different from what I know, and I have never seen a memory crystal before. But I will try my very best to help you." Kethray looked at him with those golden eyes full of desperate hope. The kind of hope that could either save someone or destroy them, depending on what happened next. And Daniel made a silent promise to himself that he would not let this child down. Elder Sithric made a sound of disapproval deep in his throat. But Maria gave him a look that silenced his protest. And the ancient dragon simply turned and walked away, leaving the child behind with a stranger. "Can I see the crystal?" Daniel asked gently. And Kethray hesitated for a long moment before slowly, carefully placing the precious object in Daniel's hands. The crystal was warm, almost alive, and Daniel could feel something inside it. A presence that pulsed weakly like a heart that was failing. And he knew without being told that this was Varnash, the brother who had given everything to protect this child, and now clung to existence by the thinnest thread. "I will need to study this very carefully," Daniel told Kethray as he carried the crystal to his workbench and set it down under a scanning light. "It might take a long time, and I might fail, but I want you to know that I will not give up easily." Kethray climbed onto a stool beside the workbench and watched Daniel work with an intensity that no child should have to carry. And when Daniel suggested that he go rest in the quarters Maria had arranged for the refugees, the young dragon shook his head firmly. "I'm staying with my brother," Kethray said. "I will not leave him alone." Daniel understood that feeling too. The fear that if he looked away even for a moment, the person you loved would slip away completely. So he found a blanket and made a small nest in the corner of his workshop and told Kethray he could stay as long as he wanted. Hours passed slowly as Daniel scanned the crystal and studied its structure and tried to understand how it worked. And the more he learned, the more he realized how difficult this task would be. Because the crystal was not a machine at all, but something organic, something grown, something that followed rules he did not know. But he kept working anyway, taking notes and running simulations and reading every piece of information he could find about Draconari technology. And when he finally looked up from his console, he found that morning had come and Kethray had fallen asleep in his nest, his small clawed hand reaching out toward the workbench where his brother's crystal sat. Flickering in the light, Daniel covered the child with another blanket and made himself a cup of coffee and sat down to begin again. Because somewhere inside that cracked crystal, a young dragon's brother was waiting to be saved. And Daniel Cooper had never been the kind of man who gave up on the impossible. 3 days passed and Daniel barely slept, spending every hour studying the memory crystal and reaching out to every scientist and engineer he knew across the galaxy. But the answers he received were always the same. Draconari memory technology was thousands of years old and completely unique. And no human had ever successfully repaired one because no human had ever truly understood how they worked. The crystal continued to flicker and fade. And each time the light dimmed, Kethray would make a small sound of fear that cut through Daniel like a knife. And he would work even harder, pushing himself to find a solution that seemed to slip further away with each passing hour. Memory crystals are not built, Elder Sithric said when he visited the workshop on the 4th day, his voice heavy with the certainty of someone who had already accepted defeat. They are grown from the hard stones of our mountains over centuries, and they bond with our neural patterns in ways that your simple human machines cannot replicate or even understand. Daniel looked up from his console, his eyes red from lack of sleep and his coffee cup empty for the 3rd time that morning. And he asked the elder to explain more because every piece of information might be the key he needed. Sithrak seemed surprised that the human wanted to learn. And perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was the desperate hope in Kethri's eyes as he watched from his corner. But the ancient dragon began to share knowledge that his people rarely gave to outsiders. The crack in the crystal has severed the internal pathways that hold the memories together. Sithrek explained as he pointed a clawed finger at the damaged area. It is like a river that has been blocked by a fallen mountain, and the water, the memories, the soul, cannot flow properly anymore, and so it fades. Then I need to find a way to bridge the gap, Daniel said, more to himself than to the elder, to create new pathways that let the memories flow again. Sithrek shook his head slowly, his iron scales catching the workshop lights as he moved. And he told Daniel that such a thing was impossible because the pathways were organic, living, part of the crystal itself. And human technology was cold and dead and could never bond with something so ancient. But Daniel was not ready to give up. And he asked Sithrek if he had any old texts or records about how crystals were cultivated, anything that might help him understand the process better. And to his surprise, the elder agreed to share what he had. I do this only for the child, Sithrek said as he transferred files to Daniel's console. Not because I believe you will succeed, but because I cannot bear to watch him lose hope without knowing that everything was tried. The files contained centuries of knowledge about crystal growing, about the minerals and energies and organic compounds that help memory crystals form and heal. And Daniel studied them until the words blurred together and his head ached from processing so much new information while he worked. Kethri began to open up, sharing small stories about his brother in a voice that was sometimes steady and sometimes broke with grief. And Daniel listened to every word because he knew that talking about the dead was part of keeping them alive. Vernash was the bravest dragon in our family, Kethri said one evening as he helped Daniel sort through tools. He was going to be a warrior like our father, but he also liked to tell jokes and make everyone laugh. And when the Vexery came, he told me to hide and then he fought them alone so I could escape. He sounds like a wonderful brother, Daniel said gently, and Kethri nodded with tears forming in his golden eyes. He gave me his crystal just before he died, the young dragon continued. He said he would always be with me, that I would never be alone. But now his voice is so quiet, and sometimes I cannot hear him at all, and I'm afraid he is leaving. Daniel put down his tools and knelt beside the child, placing a hand on his small shoulder, and he promised that he was doing everything he could to save Vernash, that he would not stop trying until there was nothing left to try. That night Daniel had a breakthrough. Not a solution, but an idea that might work if he was willing to think differently about the problem. And he called Maria to his workshop because he needed her support before he could move forward. I cannot repair the crystal using Draconari methods, he explained as Maria looked at his notes and diagrams. But I think I can build something around it. A device that uses human technology to bridge the damaged pathways and feed power and nutrients to the crystal so it can heal itself. Maria raised an eyebrow at the word nutrients. And Daniel explained that the crystal was alive in a way, that it needed certain minerals and compounds to survive, and that he believed he could create a system that would provide those things while also stabilizing the damaged areas. It would be a hybrid, Daniel said with excitement building in his voice. Part human engineering and part Draconari organic technology, working together to save what remains of Vernash. Maria looked at him for a long moment, seeing the exhaustion in his face, but also the determination. And she asked him what he needed to make this work. The list was long, and some items were expensive. And when Maria brought it to the station council, there were those who questioned why so much should be spent on fixing one alien child's keepsake, when there were refugees who needed food and medicine and shelter. Daniel stood before the council and spoke from his heart, telling them that hope was not a luxury, that saving a child's memory of his brother was not just about the crystal, but about showing that Draconari that humans cared about more than just survival. That they cared about souls and love and the things that made life worth living. If we cannot help one grieving child, Daniel said, then what are we even doing out here among the stars? The council voted to give him what he needed. And Daniel returned to his workshop to begin building the device that might save Vernash or might fail completely. But at least he would know that he had tried everything. Thuray watched him work with growing hope in his eyes. And sometimes the young dragon would help by holding tools or fetching supplies. And in those moments, Daniel saw glimpses of the child. Kethri had been before tragedy, had stolen his innocence. Sithric visited again and stood in silence, watching the human build. And when Daniel asked if he was there to tell him to give up, the ancient dragon surprised him with a different answer. I am here to offer something, Sithric said slowly as if the words cost him greatly to speak. My blood contains minerals that help crystals grow. And if it would aid your work, I will give you what you need. Daniel looked at the elder in shock because he knew from his research that Draconari blood was sacred, that sharing it with an outsider was almost unheard of. And he asked Sithrak why he would do such a thing. Because I have watched you work without rest, the elder replied. Because I have seen you comfort the child and listen to his stories and treat his brother's crystal with respect. And because I was wrong about humans, or at least I was wrong about you. Daniel accepted the gift with deep gratitude. And as he incorporated the minerals into his prototype device, he felt for the first time that success might actually be possible. That two species working together might accomplish what neither could do alone. But when he ran the first test, the crystal flickered violently and went dark. And for one terrible moment, Daniel thought he had killed Vernash forever. And Kethri cried out in anguish as his brother's light disappeared. Then the light returned, weak and unsteady but alive. And Daniel held the sobbing child against his chest and promised through his own tears that he would not stop. That he would try again and again until he found the answer. Because some things were too important to fail. The failures continued for 2 more weeks. Each attempt bringing hope and then crushing it. And Daniel lost count of how many times he rebuilt his prototype device, adjusting the power levels and nutrient mixtures and connection pathways until his hands knew the work better than his mind. Dekithrai remained by his side through it all, learning the names of tools and the functions of different components, becoming a small assistant who fetched things before Daniel even asked for them. And the bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. Why do you keep trying? The young dragon asked one night after another failed test had left Daniel staring at the ceiling in frustration. Everyone else says it is impossible, even Elder Sithrak. So why do you not give up? Daniel thought about the question for a long moment before answering. Because he wanted to give the child the truth and not just comfortable words that meant nothing. When my son was sick, Daniel finally said, I tried everything to save him, every doctor and every treatment and every desperate hope I could find. And in the end I failed and he died anyway, but I have never once regretted trying. Kethray moved closer, his golden eyes reflecting the dim light of the workshop. And he asked Daniel about his son in a voice that was gentle with the understanding of shared grief. His name was Lucas, Daniel said, and the name still hurt to speak even after 7 years. He was 8 years old when the sickness took him, and he was brave and kind, and he loved building things with me in this very workshop. I am sorry you lost him, Kethray said. And Daniel saw that the child meant it deeply, that despite his own terrible loss, he still had room in his heart to feel pain for someone else. I keep trying for you, Daniel told him. Because I know what it feels like to want one more moment with someone you love. One more chance to hear their voice and feel their presence. And if I can give that to you, then Lucas's memory will mean something. Then all the things he taught me about never giving up will live on in what I do for others. Kethray leaned against Daniel's side. And for a moment they were just two broken souls finding comfort in each other. And Daniel realized that somewhere along the way, this child had become more than just someone he was trying to help. The next morning brought new problems when the station council announced that supply shortages would require cuts to non-essential projects, and several members questioned whether the crystal repair should continue when basic needs were not being met for all the refugees. Maria fought for Daniel's project, arguing that morale and hope were just as important as food and medicine. But the debate grew heated, and Daniel feared he would be forced to stop before he could find a solution. It was Elder Sithrak who ended the argument, standing before the council in his ancient armor and speaking with a voice that commanded attention from every person in the room. I came to this station believing that humans were primitive and selfish, the elder said, creatures who cared only for their own kind and could never understand the depths of Draconari culture. But I was wrong. He pointed at Daniel, who stood at the back of the room with Kathrai holding his hand. And he told the council what he had witnessed. A human who worked without sleep to save an alien child's memories, who gave his own grief to comfort a stranger, who treated a sacred crystal with the same reverence any Draconari would show. This man has shown me what humans can be, Sithrak continued. And if you abandon his work, now you will prove that my first judgment was correct, that humans are not worthy of the respect the galaxy has begun to give them. The council voted to continue funding the project, and Daniel returned to his workshop with renewed determination and a deeper appreciation for the ancient dragon who had once dismissed him. As worthless days turned into another week, and Daniel made a discovery that changed everything. He'd been approaching the problem wrong from the beginning, trying to use human technology to dominate and control the crystal instead of supporting and nurturing it. The crystal is alive, he explained to Kethri as he redesigned his device for what felt like the 100th time. And like all living things, it wants to heal itself. But the damage is too great for it to do alone. So instead of trying to fix it myself, I need to help it fix itself. The new design was simpler than his previous attempts. A delicate web of sensors and nutrient feeds and power regulators that wrapped around the crystal without trying to force anything, just providing what the crystal needed to do its own work. Kathrai helped him build it. Small claws handling tiny components with surprising skill. And Daniel taught him about circuits and energy flows and the basics of engineering, giving the child something to focus on besides his fear of losing his brother. When the device was ready, Daniel hesitated before activating it, knowing that this might be his last chance, that if he failed again, the crystal might not survive another attempt, whatever happens. He told Kethrai, I want you to know that your brother would be proud of you, that you have been brave and strong, and you have helped me more than you know. Kethrai nodded, his small body trembling with fear and hope in equal measure. And he placed his hand on the crystal one last time before Daniel activated the device. The workshop fell silent as the device hummed to life, sending carefully measured power and nutrients into the crystal, bridging the damaged pathways with gentle electronic pulses that mimicked the natural flow of memories. For a long moment nothing happened, and Daniel felt his heart sinking as he prepared to face another failure. Another crushing blow to the child, who had already suffered so much. Then the crystal began to glow. Not the weak flickering light of before, but a steady warm radiance that filled the workshop with colors Daniel had never seen. And inside the crystal something moved, something woke. Something reached out toward the world and had almost left behind. Kethrai made a sound that was half sob and half laugh. And he pressed his small hands against the crystal as tears streamed down his silver blue scales. And from inside the crystal came a voice, faint but clear, speaking words in the Draconari language that made the child cry even harder. He says, he can see me. Kethri translated through his tears. He says he's been waiting, and he knew I would find a way. He says he's proud of me. He says thank you. Daniel felt his own eyes filling with tears as he watched the reunion between brothers, separated by death, but connected by love that refused to die. And he thought of Lucas and wished with all his heart that he could have had this moment. Two Elder Sithrak arrived at the workshop door, summoned by other Draconari who had felt the crystals awakening through some sense humans did not possess. And the ancient dragon stood frozen as he watched Kethray speaking with his brother, touching the glowing crystal, laughing and crying at the same time. "This is impossible," Sithrak whispered. "No one has ever restored a broken memory crystal. Not in 10,000 years of our history." But the impossible was happening right in front of him. And Daniel Cooper, simple human engineer, had made it happen through stubbornness and love and a refusal to accept that some things could not be fixed. It is not fully repaired, Daniel explained quietly. The crack is still there and always will be. But the device I built will keep the pathways open and feed the crystal what it needs to survive. And as long as the device works, Vernash will remain. Sithrak looked at Daniel with new eyes, seeing not a primitive human, but something else entirely. And he placed a clawed hand on the engineer's shoulder in a gesture of respect that crossed the gap between species. "You have given us back our dead," the elder said. "And there is no greater gift in all the universe." Word spread through the station like fire through dry grass. And within hours, every Draconari refugee knew that a human had done the impossible. That Daniel Cooper had restored a broken memory crystal and given a child back his brother. They came to his workshop in waves, carrying their own damaged crystals and broken keepsakes and fading memories of loved ones lost to the Vexery attack. And Daniel looked at the line stretching down the corridor and felt both overwhelmed and deeply honored. "I cannot fix all of these," he told Maria when she came to check on him. "There are too many, and each one is different. I am only one person working with tools I barely understand." But Maria reminded him that he did not have to do it alone, that he could teach others his techniques, that the station had engineers and scientists who would gladly learn if he was willing to share what he had discovered. So Daniel became a teacher, setting up training sessions in the main hall, where he showed human and Draconari alike how to build the support devices, how to read the crystals and understand what they needed, how to be gentle and patient and let the living technology guide the repair. Kethray attended every session, sitting in the front row with his restored crystal glowing softly beside him. And sometimes Vernash would speak through the crystal to offer advice or encouragement. His voice still faint but growing stronger each day. Elder Sithrak became Daniel's unlikely partner, providing knowledge about crystal biology and sacred traditions that helped the human engineers understand what they were working with. And the ancient dragon who had once dismissed humans as primitives now called Daniel his friend. "I have lived for 400 years," Sithrak told the training group during one session. "And I have seen many things that surprised me. But nothing has surprised me more than watching your species rise to meet a challenge that mine had given up on centuries ago. The work was slow and not every crystal could be saved. Some were too damaged and some had already faded beyond recovery. But for every failure, there were successes, moments of reunion and joy that filled the station with hope and healing. Then the Vexery Collective sent their warning. And everything changed. The message arrived on a priority channel that cut through all other communications. A harsh voice speaking threats that made the station's lights flicker with the force of the transmission. "You harbor criminals and traitors," the Vexery commander declared. "The Draconari who fled our justice think they have found safety among you primitives. But there is no safety. There is only delayed punishment. Surrender the refugees or face destruction." Commander Maria Holloway responded with words that would later become famous throughout the sector, telling the Veguri that Outpost Meridian would never surrender anyone who came seeking protection. that humanity did not abandon those in need, that if the collective wanted a fight, they would find one waiting for them. The station went to high alert, and Daniel found himself torn between his work with the crystals and his duty to help prepare for the coming battle. But Kethray made the choice easier by refusing to leave the workshop. "We will keep working," the young dragon said with a determination that seemed too large for his small body. "My brother says that saving memories is more important than being afraid." I believe him. So Daniel continued teaching and repairing while the station prepared its defenses, and other engineers took over the work when he needed to rest. And the production of support devices increased until dozens of crystals had been stabilized and dozens of families had been reunited with their dead elder. Sithrek called a meeting of all the Draconari refugees, gathering them in the main hall where they filled every seat and spilled into the corridors beyond. And he spoke to them about what was coming and what they would do. "The humans have given us more than shelter," Sithrek said, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "They have given us back our ancestors and our children and our beloved dead. They have treated our sacred crystals with reverence and spent their own resources to heal what we thought could never be healed." He paused, looking out at the crowd of his people, refugees who had lost everything and found unexpected kindness among aliens they barely knew. "The Vexri are coming," Sithrek continued, "and they expect to find a station of soft humans and broken dragons. But they will find something else instead. They will find two species standing together as one, fighting for each other because that is what family does." The Draconari roared their approval, a sound that shook the station and told the humans listening that they were not alone, that allies they had never expected were ready to fight and die beside them. Daniel attended the War Council as a civilian advisor, offering ideas about using the station's repair drones as defensive weapons and suggesting ways to reinforce critical areas with salvaged materials. And Maria listened to every word because she had learned to trust his unconventional thinking. "The Vexri have better ships and more soldiers," Maria told the gathered officers and volunteers. "But we have something they cannot match. We have a reason to fight that goes beyond survival. We have become a family of humans and Draconari who will not abandon each other no matter what comes." The enemy fleet arrived 2 days later, appearing at the edge of the system like a swarm of angry insects. And the battle began with a fury that made the station shake and the lights flicker and the alarms scream. Without stopping, Daniel stayed in his workshop as long as he could, making final repairs to crystals that might not survive the attack, and Kethray stayed with him, holding Vernash's crystal and talking to his brother as the walls shook around them. "Are you afraid?" Daniel asked the child as an explosion somewhere nearby knocked them both to the floor. "Yes," Kethray admitted, "but Vernash says that being afraid is not the same as being weak. And he says that I should stay close to you because you are the kind of human who protects children." Daniel felt something shift in his heart, a recognition that this child had become more than a project or a patient, that somewhere along the way Kethray had become someone he would die to protect. And he knew in that moment that whatever happened next, he would not let this young dragon face it alone. The station's defenses were failing, overwhelmed by the sheer number of Vexri ships. And Maria's voice came through the intercom, ordering all civilians to emergency shelters. But before Daniel could gather Kethray and run the workshop door, exploded inward Vexri soldiers poured through the gap, their black armor gleaming and their weapons raised. And Daniel threw himself over Kethray without thinking, shielding the child with his own body as the aliens advanced. "Human," the lead soldier hissed. "Step aside and give us the dragon. Our quarrel is not with your kind. This child is under my protection," Daniel replied, his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. "And I will not let you take him." The soldier raised his weapon, and Daniel prepared to die. thinking of Lucas and hoping his son would be proud of how his father had chosen to end. But the shot never came, because Elder Sithrak crashed through the wall in a burst of ancient fury, his iron scales deflecting enemy fire as he tore into the Vexery with claws that had not known battle in decades, but remembered every lesson more. Draconari warriors followed, refugees who had been civilians just weeks ago, but who fought now with the desperation of people protecting their new home. And the Vexery fell back in confusion because they had expected broken refugees, not dragons who had found something worth fighting for. Get the child to safety. Sithrak roared at Daniel as he engaged another enemy. We will hold them here. Daniel scooped up Kethre and ran, dodging through corridors filled with smoke and debris. And all around them the battle raged as humans and Draconari fought side by side against the enemy that had taken everything from one species and threatened to take everything from both behind them. Inside Kethre's crystal, Vernash sang a war song that his brother had never heard him sing before, and the young dragon clutched the glowing crystal and knew that even in this moment of terror, he was not alone, that his brother was still with him, and that the human carrying him through the chaos would never let him fall. The battle lasted for 6 hours, though to Daniel it felt like days, running through burning corridors with Kethri in his arms, while the station shook with explosions and the screams of both attackers and defenders filled the air. He found shelter in a storage bay deep in the station's core, a reinforced room where other civilians had gathered, and he held the young dragon close as they listened to the sounds of combat moving back and forth through the levels above them. Daniel, Kethri whispered, Vonash says that ships are coming. Big ships with the mark of our people. He says that help is almost here. Before Daniel could respond, the sounds of battle began to change, the rhythm of attack and defense shifting to something different, something that sounded almost like victory. And then Maria's voice came through the intercom with words that made everyone in the shelter cry with relief. The combined human Draconari fleet has arrived, Maria announced, her voice cracking with exhaustion and joy. The Vexery are retreating. I repeat, the enemy is retreating. We have won. The shelter erupted in cheers. Humans and Draconari hugging each other and weeping and laughing all at once. And Daniel felt Kethrai's small arms wrap around his neck in an embrace that spoke of gratitude and love and the bond that had grown between them through weeks of shared hope and fear. The aftermath of the battle revealed the cost of victory. Sections of the station destroyed and lives lost on both sides, but also stories of courage that would be told for generations. Stories of humans shielding Draconari children with their bodies and Draconari warriors dying to protect human engineers and two species becoming one people in the fire of combat. Daniel was injured. A piece of shrapnel had caught his arm during his run through the corridors, and he woke in the medical bay to find Kethrai sitting beside his bed with Vernash's crystal glowing softly between his small claws. You were very brave, the young dragon said. Elder Sithrak says you fought like a dragon, which is the best thing he knows how to say about anyone. Daniel smiled despite the pain in his arm, and he reached out to touch the crystal that held Vernash, feeling the warmth of the restored soul inside. The brother who had been saved by human stubbornness and Draconari wisdom working together. How is he? Daniel asked. And Kethrai activated the crystal so that Vernash could speak for himself. I am strong. Vernash's voice came through clear and warm. Stronger than I was before, because the human who fixed me gave me something that Draconari crystals have never had. He gave me a piece of human determination that refuses to fade. Daniel did not fully understand what that meant, but he could hear in Varnash's voice a vitality that had not been there before, as if the hybrid device had done more than just stabilize the crystal, as if it had somehow enhanced what was already there. Elder Sithrak visited later that day, his iron scales bearing new scars from the battle, but his eyes holding a peace that Daniel had never seen in them before. And the ancient dragon sat beside the bed and spoke of things that would change too. Civilizations forever. The Draconari High Council has been watching what happened here, Sithrak said. They have seen how a human saved our memories and how our peoples fought together against a common enemy. And they have made a decision that will reshape the galaxy. He told Daniel that human engineers would be invited to the Draconari homeworld to learn crystal technology, to become the first outsiders ever allowed to study the sacred art of memory preservation. And in exchange, the Draconari would share their medical knowledge with humanity. Treatments and cures that humans had never imagined possible. Two species who were strangers a month ago, Sithrak continued, are now bound together as family, and it began with you, Daniel Cooper. It began with a man who refused to accept that a child's grief was not worth fighting for. Daniel thought about Lucas, about the son he could not save, about the hole in his heart that had never fully healed. And he realized that saving Vernash had been more than just an act of kindness. It had been a way of honoring his son's memory by becoming the kind of father who never gave up Maria came to see him next. Her commander's uniform torn and blood-stained, but her smile bright with relief. And she told him that the station would be rebuilt stronger than before, that the alliance between humans and Draconari would be headquartered here, that what they had built together would become a beacon for the entire galaxy. You started something bigger than a repair project, Maria said. You started a friendship between species that will last for centuries. And it all began because you would not stop trying to fix a broken crystal. When Daniel was finally released from the medical bay, he returned to his workshop to find it transformed. The damaged walls had been repaired, and new equipment had been installed, and a sign had been hung above the door that read, Crystal Keeper's Workshop in both human letters and Draconari symbols. Gethray was waiting for him inside, along with a group of young Draconari and human children who had gathered to learn the art of crystal repair. And Daniel felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized what his life had become. He taught the children that day and every day after, sharing everything he had learned, watching them grow in skill and confidence. And Vernash helped from inside his crystal, offering advice and telling jokes that made the students laugh even as they worked on most delicate repairs years past. And the galaxy changed in ways that historians would study for generations. The alliance between humans and Draconari growing stronger with each passing decade. And at the center of it all was a simple workshop on a station called Meridian, where a human and a dragon had first learned to trust each other. Kothrai grew tall and strong, his silver-blue scales darkening to the deep azure of an adult dragon. And he became the greatest crystal keeper his people had ever known, combining human engineering with Draconari tradition in ways that no one else could match. But he never forgot the human who had saved his brother. And on the day Daniel Cooper grew too old to work anymore, Kethri came to him with a question that had been waiting in his heart for a very long time. Will you be my family? The young dragon asked, using the same words Daniel had once spoken to him. I know that Vernash is my brother and will always be my brother. But you are something else. You are the one who gave him back to me. And that makes you part of us in a way that nothing can ever change. Daniel smiled, his old hands still stained with the minerals and compounds of a lifetime spent fixing the unfixable. And he nodded yes, because no other answer was possible. Because family was not just about blood or species, but about love and sacrifice and the choice to stand together when everything else fell apart. The final scene of Daniel Cooper's life took place in the same workshop where it had all begun, surrounded by the children he had taught and the dragons who called him friend, and the crystal that held Vernash, singing a lullaby that an old mother had once sung to her sons on a world that existed now only in memory. And When Daniel closed his eyes for the last time, he felt Lucas there waiting for him, and Von Ash, and all the souls he had helped save, and he knew that he was going home to join them. That death was not an ending, but simply another kind of repair. A fixing of broken hearts and separated families and love that had never really been lost. Rai placed a new crystal on the workbench that day. A crystal that glowed with the warm, steady light of a human soul, preserved the Draconari way. And he whispered to his brother inside his own crystal that they had a new family member now, that Daniel was with them forever, and that the workshop would continue its work until every broken memory in the galaxy had been made whole again. Can you fix him again? The Dragon Child had once asked, and the answer had changed the universe. Because a simple human had looked at something impossible and decided that it was worth trying anyway. And that was the most human thing of all.